Welcome, everyone, to the Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable Museum of African History. On behalf of our President and CEO, Perry Irmer, and of the Board of Trustees, we welcome you to your museum. I am retired State Senator Don Trotter, and also a member of the illustrious board. This evening, we will give tribute to the individuals and to the nations of people who have persevered through their vision, hard work, and the strength of their faith. People working together to build families, communities, and nations in the image of God. A celebration of the alliance between Black American Jews and Israel. A special tribute will be given to honor our brother and leader, Ambassador Prince Asiel Ben Israel. To start this evening, will you join with me in standing for the anthems? Then the Jewish national anthem, then the Black national anthem will lift every voice and sing.
To Dr. Brother Donnie Trotter, please give him a round of applause. The theme this evening is the image of God. I would like you to bow your heads in prayer. The image of God is the imago Dei. That's what God would want us to be. Thank you, God, for bringing us to this day, deep inside the history of Black History Month. Thank you for Du Sable for landing in Chicago. And thank you, God, for a great woman who founded this museum, who gave us the poem, "What shall I tell my children who are Black?" We go with this kind of a legacy, this kind of a history, but on this particular night, February 12th, year 2022, we honor a man that was called by God a long time ago, coming out of Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon Prince Asiel Ben Israel. And the God of our ancestors anointed him to preach the gospel, give sight to the blind, and make the lame walk.
Good evening, everybody. We're all getting used to coming back together. It's so nice that you all have come. My name is Kristina King. I'm the president of the Shiloh Institute. We'll be sharing a little bit about us later. I just wanted to acknowledge your presence. Thank you all for coming out and to acknowledge our event chair people, Congressman Danny Davis, State Senator Donnie Trotter, and Dr. Carol Adams. So thank you all very much for your help. And we will get greetings now from Dr. Daniel.
Shalom everyone, good evening, Erev Tov. On behalf of the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest, it's a true pleasure to be here this evening at the Du Sable Museum with all of you this Saturday evening to celebrate the relationship between Black America, Jews, and Israel. Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our partners, Kristina King of the Shiloh Institute, Honorary Prince Asiel for their vision and efforts in making this event possible this evening. The purpose of coming together tonight isn't just to honor our past, but to activate and inspire partnerships on global and local issues across our communities, which is at the heart of the Israeli Consulate's priorities here in the Midwest. We have inspiring speakers ahead of us tonight who will highlight our historical ties, the spiritual foundations of our countries, God's love for diversity, and we will end the evening by taking a look at the future of Black Jewish Israel conversation and action. We hope that in the midst of the pandemic, we are so happy to have you here physically with us today. It seems like it never ends, but this is a great opportunity to feel the community that we all built here together. This is a safe space to discuss and celebrate our togetherness. If there's anything we've learned here during my time in the Deputy Consulate here in Chicago, is that Black America, Jews and Israel, are all deeply preservant and driven by social impact. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite our final co-chair, Congressman Danny Davis, to join us with his remarks. Thank you, enjoy the program, Toda Rabba.
Well, thank you very much to State Senator Donnie Trotter, who is going to facilitate and has been facilitating the evening, to the other co-chairs of this tremendous event, to the president of the DuSable Museum of African American History, all of those who have come, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Every time I walk inside the door of this institution, I am electronically charged, remembering the relationship and the work of Dr. Margaret Burroughs, her husband, and all of those who laid the foundation for the creation of this institution. And so I get excited when I think of the tremendous impact that State Senator Emil Jones had when he was president of the Illinois Senate, in terms of being able to bring greatly needed resources to the institution. And then to be here this evening with all of you to celebrate the life of Prince Asiel Ben Israel, his wonderful wife, the First Lady of the Hebrew Israelite nation, to be with the new Consulate General of the Midwest for the State of Israel, and to be with all of you. It's a great way to celebrate African American History Month. But it's also a great way to look at the relationship that has existed. I smiled when I thought of the Shiloh Institute, because I just had a communique from a young lady at the Shiloh Baptist Church in Joliet, Illinois. And so anybody who thinks that there may not be a relationship, I remember as a child growing up with the idea that there was a serious connection between Black people, Negroes as we were being called at the time, colored people, and Jewish people, and the nation of Israel. And as they taught me how to read, they taught me something about a fellow named Ralph Bunch, a Black guy who actually was very instrumental in drawing the lines, carving up the territory, and deciding what was going to be the state of Israel and what was going to be the Palestinian nations in the area and around it. So this nexus, this connection, has been since the beginning. In the beginning was the Word. And I get a chance to come and listen to the eloquence of one of the most eloquent theologians that I've ever heard, Reverend Al Sampson, give an invocation that you would hope would last into the benediction. But that's traditional Al Sampson. To give tribute to Prince Asiel Ben Israel, it has been my good fortune to travel all over the world with Prince. I think we've been to Africa at least 10 or 12 times. We've been to South Africa, we've been to East Africa, we've been to North Africa, we've been to West Africa. As a matter of fact, we went to the Cameroon 3 times. We've traveled to Israel. I've experienced Dimona and wonder how in the world that this group of blacks from Chicago and other places in the United States of America managed to get to Dimona, Israel, and establish a settlement, and to be described in the Journal of American Medicine, JAMA, as one of the healthiest group of individuals in Western civilization because of their diet. I was so glad one time when I left Israel with Prince, I said, let me get back so I can get me some hot water cornbread. Because all they was, they just wasn't into that. They was into what they were into. But to see the individuals there serve as educational consultants to the Israeli Department of Education.
Yes, sir.
I come from a proud generation of folks. I grew up chopping cotton, went to a one-room school, had one teacher who taught 8 grades, plus the little primer and the big primer, all by herself. My folks were sharecroppers. Let me tell you, they shared a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding and a lot of hope and a lot of possibility to connect with Prince and his family. I tell you, some of the brightest people I've ever talked to. Prince is one of the smartest people I ever met. Knows more about international relationships than all kind of ambassadors and potentates and other kind of folks. And I'm amazed just listening. I could listen to Prince for hours at a time. I remember Richard Borkin and I doing some things with him. And so Prince, I'm going to have to run out of here, but I'm not running away from here. I've just got to go someplace else and be someplace else with some other people. But I want you and your family and all of the Hebrew Israelites throughout the nation and throughout the diaspora to know that we revere the work that you've done.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate the relationship you've helped us establish with the nation of Israel. And all I can really say is long live Prince Asiel.
Yes, sir.
And thank you.
And thank you again, having shared so many of those journeys with you. I mean, it's an education in itself from from talking to the Bedouins and to actually going into the Knesset and actually meeting with, the Prime Minister and talking to the people. It's again an education that you can't pay for. It's one that you have to be there and to know the relationships of that Prince Asiel had with the people of Israel and throughout Africa. Again, I traveled so much with the Prince that I did something that a lot of people thought wasn't possible. I ran out of pages in my passport. Oh yeah, I did get stopped at the gate, but it wasn't the first time I got stopped at the airport gate. But that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Jesse Jackson Jr. Former Congressman Jesse L. Jackson Jr. began service in the U.S. House of Representatives in 1995 and served the constituents of the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois, where he currently resides for 17 years. He has co-authored several books with his father, Reverend Jackson Sr. He has released his current book, The Finger of God, From the Lineage of David to the Presidency of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jesse Jackson.
Let me first begin by giving honor and praise to God for the great privilege of being here at the DuSable Museum, of being able to share with Prince Asiel Ben Israel, whom I've known for more than half of my life, whose tremendous example, whose sense of global responsibility, whose sense of international connectedness for African Americans and disconnected people. For those of us who knew not from our formal educations what it meant to be citizens of the world, our first experiences and expectations that we were bigger than the South Side, that we were bigger than the West Side, came from none other than Prince Asiel Ben Israel. Honored to honor you on this occasion. To the Shiloh Institute, the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest, to Congressman Danny Davis, Senator Donnie Trotter, Dr. Carol Adams, Professor Rosenstock, I'm honored to be here to celebrate the alliance between African Americans, the Jewish people, and Israel. When Kristina King asked me to deliver remarks this evening for roughly 10 to 15 minutes, I had no idea that I would be following the voice of God. Congressman Davis speaks on the floor of the Congress. Everyone knows with that resonating voice that he should probably be a member of the Temptations. But we are blessed to have him as our own here in the city of Chicago. Please give Congressman Davis a great round of applause. I've been asked this evening to give some remarks on the image of God. In the Latin, as Dr. Sampson said, the Imago Dei. In celebrating the alliance between African Americans and the Jewish people, a program titled In the Image of God is rich with historical significance. Significant at the point of intersection, the definition being the point at which two things intersect. And also significant at the point of intersectionality, the definition being the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, gender, as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or advantage, or creating different modes of discrimination and privilege. In the image of God, we find a point of intersection in our mutual belief in the God of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, David, Moses, and Jesus. In the image of God, we find a point of intersection in our mutual belief in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. In the image of God, we find a point of intersection in the slave experience. Let my people go. And the wilderness experience. In the image of God, we find a perfect intersection between Goshen and the ghetto. However, in the image of God, we find a differentiating point in the promised land experience. We have a different and differentiated promised land experience. In the promised land, the Jewish people are in the majority, and they fight any and all efforts, as they should, to subjugate them, the majority view. In our promised land experience, school districts are banning books, revising history, writing a narrative that excludes our contribution, the perspective from the minority, and a dissenting point of view. In the image of God, we find a differentiating point of view in the Pharaonic slave experience, as different than the race-based, constitutionally sanctioned slave experience. Slavery is a different experience when it is sanctioned by the people and by the Constitution. People who legally immigrate or who migrate into our constitutional republic experience always want to know, depending upon where they're immigrating or migrating from, what are black folks always complaining about? They subsequently call us lazy. They question our work ethic. They question our patriotism. They question our commitment, and worse. They inherit rights that others have fought and died for over centuries. And they are the Johnny-come-lately to the American human rights experience, taking advantage of fruit in the present from a past sown with struggle and trial and tribulation. Recently, I saw an Afghan refugee on the news wearing a MAGA hat, talking about making America great again. I said to myself, damn. It is a differentiating point when ending slavery and racism and its lasting effect of white supremacy and the life, liberty, and happiness system is defined at the hands of governors and legislatures, presidents and congresses, federal and state courts. To end slavery in the constitutional context required a civil war where the American people lost family members on both sides of the legal arguments. Moral arguments and the hand of God were evident in the experience of the Jewish people and evident in our experience, but we had to change the Constitution and the law. New interpretations from the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the 1896 decisions in Plessy versus Ferguson, to the Brown versus the Board of Education decision in 1954, to the present, and a constant vigilance against new and evolving methods and modes of discrimination, from Jim Crow to Jim Crow Esquire. That's who we're supposed to be voting for every 4 years. Not a Democrat, not a Republican, not someone from 1793, the party of 1793, the Democratic Republican Party, or the Republican Party of 1854. But the republic that was established in 1787 based upon the highest traditions of the Judeo-Christian faith. A faith that initially African Americans were not welcomed into. But through their later experience here in the United States, had traveled over a way that with tears had been watered and constructed a new active faith in the United States of America. And so I figured it out. I had found God's finger in the Constitution. It had transformed my experience and my testimony at that moment, Prince Asiel. Prison was the best thing that ever happened to me, and maybe even the best thing that ever happened to our country. There's 68 million men and women in this country who paid their debt to society, and yet after they paid their debt, they did what the judge said do, and they did what the jury said do. They still find themselves isolated and set aside in our system. Blacks and Jews, we can do better than that. The judge gave me a 30-month sentence, but I would spend the next 7 years carving away everything in the stone in order to set the angel free. I had to carve away white male landowners and carve away the 3/5 clause and carve away discrimination against voting with women and carve away the Bill of Rights and carve away the Democratic Party and carve away the party of Jefferson and Jackson and carve away the party of 1854 of Abraham Lincoln. I had to carve away the party of Donald Trump. I had to carve away big versus small states and carve away slavery and sexism and racism and anti-Semitism and white supremacy and misogyny and revisionist history and ignorance and anti-intellectualism. I had to carve away the Congress of the United States, the Senate of the United States, the courts, and all that was left in the Constitution was the cornerstone, the finger of God. I carved away everything that was not God, and I found the cornerstone of the Constitution upon which the foundation was set. I conclude, we must therefore fight, as Rabbi Abraham Heschel and Martin Luther King Jr. did, against the Nazi flag. We must fight, as Rabbi Abraham Heschel and Martin Luther King Jr. did, against the Confederate flag. Wherever the banners are raised, we must remember the Holocaust, and we must remember the hell of a cost that all of us have paid to build a more perfect union. I pray, along with 68 million debt-paid felons, that history remember us, not for the errors of our ways, Prince Asiel, but as the Renaissance sculptors of a new interpretation of the Constitution and an even greater society. Thank you for having me.
The divine in you has been freed, my brother. And you just took my notes. Thank you. Give him another hand, please. He has not such a compelling remarks. We now would like to bring to the podium Professor Bruce Rosenstock. Bruce Rosenstock is a professor in the Department of Religion at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where he is also the Director of Graduate Studies and Hebrew Language Program Coordinator. He is the author of numerous articles and books and a regular lecturer across the country. Before Professor Rosenstock shares with us this evening, I would like to welcome Prince Asiel from the original Hebrew community to perform Under Israel's Skies. And immediately following, would you please come forward, Dr. Rosenstock. my notes with me.
Shalom, shalom. How the heaven are you? It's great to have all the family here celebrating the life of Prince Asiel. And briefly, I want to say, if you look at this backdrop, there were a lot of things that we went to Israel for. And then there were a lot of things that kept us in Israel. One of them was in Dimona. This is what the sky looked like at night. And those of you who have been, you know what I'm saying? It's a very transcendental scenario under Israel's skies. So we thank Prince, because most of us would not have had the experience had he not been born to do the work that he has done for all of us. There's a warm wind blowing in the morning tonight. The stars are shining bright. Says everything's alright. The world is ours. God has placed at our feet. I'm enjoying your beauty and your spirit so sweet. And if there's perfection, this must be it. Heaven in your eyes, walking with you. Some of y'all know it. Where? Under Israel sky. Under Israel sky. Under Israel skies. Under Israel skies. Your beauty surpasses any I know. There's a peace in your smile, love in your glow, queen of my life, woman of my soul. If there's anything you want tonight, the world is yours. And if there's perfection, this must be heaven in your eyes, walking with you under the Israel sky. Under the Israel sky. Under Israel skies. Under Israel skies.
I'd like to thank the DuSable Museum. I'd like to thank the Shiloh Institute and Dr. King Consul General of Israel for the Midwest, Congressman Davis, State Senator Trotter, Congressman Jackson, Prince Asiel, and his family here tonight. The other princes from the African Hebrew Israelite community, and all the honored guests assembled here, ladies and gentlemen. I have the privilege and great honor to stand before you tonight because of a book I wrote entitled Transfinite Life, Oscar Goldberg and the Vitalist Imagination. My book was the first book published in English about this German Jewish scholar, Oscar Goldberg. Oscar Goldberg's major book in German, entitled The Reality of the Hebrews, appeared in 1925. The book is a combination of philosophy, Kabbalah, Hebrew philology, all focused on showing how the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, provides a blueprint for bringing the God of Israel into direct contact with the world in order to transform it into a place of justice and peace where suffering and pain no longer affect the human life. I will tell you more about Oscar Goldberg a little later, but now I want to explain how this Bible scholar came to the attention of Prince Asiel and the African Hebrew Israelites. Derville was an avid student of Goldberg's book. He wrote to Ben-Ami from Berlin, where he had read in the newspapers about the problems that the African Israelites were facing in their effort to remain in Israel. Dating his letter to them according to the traditional Hebrew system, the 15th of Shvat, 5732, which was January 31st, 1972, he wrote to them as follows: "My dear brethren, by this letter I wish to inform you that the famous German Hebrew religious philosopher Oscar Goldberg has predicted the coming of your movement as the vanguard of the Messiah age." Amen. Over the next couple of years, Derville continued to correspond with Ben-Ami. He even planned on opening a Friends of the African Hebrew Israelite Center in Berlin. A quick word about Harry Derville, a fascinating figure in his own right. He was German, not Jewish, born sometime in the 1870s. That means that when he wrote to Ben-Ami, he was approaching 100 years of age. He was educated as a Protestant minister. Besides being fluent in French and English, he knew the ancient languages of the Old and the New Testaments, and he had a particular interest in Jewish mysticism. When Goldberg published The Reality of the Hebrews in 1925, he absorbed it and made it an essential part of his own faith. Derville always seemed to have been open-minded about Judaism. After the war ended, he was appointed to be on Berlin's Committee for Religious Affairs. He actually gave the keynote address at the first synagogue to be reopened for use in all of Germany.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was it was a learning experience. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see your video, but hopefully there'll be another venue that we can all get together And you'll see that, I'm sure it's well, certain it's well done. So look forward to it. Next, we are coming to see us is I want to introduce the Consul General. Yinam Cohen is the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. He is a career diplomat with 15 years of experience in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Before arriving in Chicago, he held a position of Senior Policy Advisor to Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi and the Director of the Policy Department in the Minister's Bureau. Prior to that, Consul General Cohen was a Director of the UN Political Affairs Department, where he oversaw Israel's diplomatic campaigns in the UN Security Council and the General Assembly in Israel. He has served in diplomatic capacities for the State of Israel to Spain, to Spain, Germany, and Colombia. Please stand and give a warm welcome to the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest.
Thank you. Good evening. Erev Tov, Shavua Tov. Thank you. Just yesterday, I came back from a quick visit in Israel. As many of you know, there is a new government in the country, and it is the most diverse government in the history of Israel. The most valuable lesson that I've learned from our unprecedented pluralistic coalition is that there is always room for everyone at the table. And this is a message about Israel I want to convey to the Black community and to the Jewish community today. Come with your curiosities, your questions, even your concerns. Let's have a conversation about it and engage meaningfully. Let's discuss the transformative process that our communities have gone through to address what our communities are facing today. Because it seems as though we made it. Black America made it. Jews made it. Israel made it. From the chains of slavery to the White House. From centuries of yearning for the ancestral homeland to the reality of the state of Israel. Apparently, we're finally where we wanted to be. But what was once slavery and exile has taken on new forms: racism, anti-Semitism, discrimination, hate crimes, and inequality. Another era of struggle for social justice has emerged among the Black community, demanding not only equal rights, but equal representation, equal opportunity and equity, and demanding accountability for the unjust taking of life. The news for the Jewish community isn't news at all. 2021 was claimed to be the most anti-Semitic year worldwide in the past decade. Already in 2022, Jews are being held hostage in their house of worship in Texas. Their businesses, schools, and synagogues are being vandalized, even here in Chicagoland. Israel is condemned despite achieving in its short 73 years of existence what some countries haven't been able to achieve in centuries. A coalition government and a parliament that represents all the members of our diverse nation, Jews and Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Ethiopians, second-generation Holocaust survivors, people with disabilities, and the list goes on. The Black community and the Jewish community know the significance of history. When others try to delegitimize our historical struggles, to distort our motives, we must bring the legacy of our ancestors to the present. I think of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who brought his freedom movement all the way to Chicago, not far from where the first Black president of the United States would build his political career, where Harold Washington would become the first Black mayor of Chicago, and where people sitting in this very room would become pioneers in Chicago's Black political leadership. It was also here in Chicago that Dr. King met Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who would one day march with him in Selma. That is why the rest of this evening will be dedicated to people like Prince Asiel, whose rich legacy connects Black America, Africa, and Israel. That is why we are so glad to be working with the Shiloh Institute today, under the leadership of Kristina King, who has years of experience in Black, Jewish, Israel relations. As we prepare the way for present and future generations, our greatest battles are still ahead. Let's win them together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Consul General. Those are certainly some very strong remarks. And I, for one, and I'm sure everyone here is with me, look forward to that partnership that you discussed. We've had good relations, and as with everything can get better and sweeter. So let's do that. Next, I have the privilege of bringing up a good friend of mine, former director of this great institution, the DuSable Museum, also the director of Inner City Studies of Northeastern Illinois University, and obviously has a lot of friends here as well. I would like to bring to the podium Dr. Carol Adams.
Well, it's good to be home. I always feel good when I come in here, the house that Margaret built. And I wanted to just commend the current director, Perry Irma, who is also doing a very fine job here. My relationship with Prince Asiel goes back to the days when I was the head of African American Studies at Loyola University. I happened to meet him from a mutual friend. And I had a radio show too at that time. And I decided I'd have him on my show because I'd been hearing so much about the African Hebrew Israelites at Jerusalem. I wanted to know more. And in the course of that, he invited me to come and see for myself. Okay? And that was very significant. I'm sort of going old school, new school tonight, so you have to bear with me because some of this is in paper and some of it's in my phone. And so I want to just read what I wrote about that experience, called Roll Call, R-O-L-E. And so we gathered at Dimona, from the place of our origin and of our dispersion, from South Africa to Chicago, Ghana to Atlanta, Zimbabwe to Washington, D.C., Liberia and Indianapolis, and all points in between. Answering a call, not to arms, but to spirit. All souls, original man, the true Eve, the only Adam, citizens of the first world, reconnecting like those dry bones, determined to live again. But a word of caution, it will take more than a new song and a vegan diet. It will require us to define our respective roles and execute. Be messengers, teachers, soldiers, put in work, be the change. Activate those colonial educations for the benefit of our people. See, I knew this was going to happen. When I went to the phone, it was going to disappear. All right, hold on. To have the will to change his life and the life of thousands of others. To be bold enough to wage a global quest for freedom and have the audacity to connect with Africans all over the world. To secure our freedom and affirm ourselves as the first people. A fact now verified by every reputable scientist, archaeologist, and historian in the world. It is not easy to carry forth a message that runs counter to the narrative of the oppressor, who reinforce their falsehoods by outlawing the truth. Witness, if you will, the move to outlaw the teaching of Black history in the United States, where Not yesterday, but today. In 2022, those same battles we fought, we are fighting over and over again. They want to forget everything about history. And by the way, the Holocaust too. Both Holocausts. Witness, if you will, the move to outlaw the teaching of Black history right now in 2022, but we have seen in Prince the willingness to go the distance and the strength to turn enemies into allies. Even in the face, so it keeps disappearing on me. Even in the face of loss, confinement, and a host of betrayals and indignities, he has persevered. And by all accounts, is no ways tired. And so tonight we celebrate you, we honor you, we salute you. A warrior, a prince, indeed a king. But in the parlance of the neighborhood, a man, a main man. Indeed a man for all reasons. Join me in saluting Prince Asiel Ben Israel.
Act out Franklin Roosevelt. He was the only one that could operate and run the world from a wheelchair. And so, let me first say, I can't thank my brother, friend, and leader, the head of the Israeli Consulate, Cohen, for embracing me and his people from another mother. When Mayor Rahm Emanuel came on the south side, I sent my son, who was born in Israel, and told him that he was his brother from another mother. Not only did the mayor and I develop a great friendship and a great relationship, but he gave the second generation of us in Israel an award to recognize Soul Vegetarian as the restaurant worthy of receiving the grant in Chicago. Now, I'm going to be very short tonight in terms of my presentation, because Prince Asiel has already spoken. He's Danny Davis, he's Donnie Trotter, he's Coy Pugh, he's Richard Boykin, he's Dr. Carol Adams, who introduced me to Roy Otley, documenting the Hebrews in America. And she traveled to Israel with me to firsthand see. I also took Islamic leaders from Chicago so that they would see that Israel was not racist towards Muslims. I took the militant Islamic community to Israel to see for themselves that they were great people and that they welcome us Our promise in Israel was not racism. It was getting to know each other. Because they had been abused so badly, they didn't know who to trust. But then the God of Israel brought the Consul General Cohen, and he received me as his long-lost brother and family member. Dr. Rosenstock received me. He did not doubt until he was able to verify. When Prince Amiel and Prince El Ram reached out for Professor Rosenstock, he did research on us. He did research to make sure, as any scholar would do, that we were the ones that Goldberg wrote about. So he investigated whether or not the people who knew Goldberg could validate him writing a letter to us in 1971. We wrote him back and said, we want to come see you in Germany. He said, not yet, because all of Germany will hail your coming. He said, I see it. This man was in his 90s when he wrote us this. A Nazi, former Nazi, writing to a Black American, and he meant it. And so as God would have it, the Holy One of Israel put the professor in my life. So I want to say to you tonight, without preaching a sermon or needing to occupy this space, the Jesse Jackson Jr. brought full circle to the pain of the black man that needed to be chiseled out of that marble, like the stone that the builder rejected, and said that we now will become the chief cornerstone to bring peace and justice to the world. And so, Congressman, I'm proud to be your brother, your friend, your mother, your father have set a scale, a bar that's difficult to master in Chicago. Tonight you planted that seed for their future. Not of shame, but of fame. Because God is getting ready to work a work with you. My God. That only God could do. What better place to do it except with the Consul General of Israel, the land of the righteous, to be setting a stage to prepare for the future. I'm asking you to join me, along with Congressman Davis, to begin to make the politics of America see Israel in a different light. They are not racist. We're not saying that there are people that are ignorant of who we were and are. But the bar is being set. The Consul General has lifted it up. that if you are a good hurdler, you'll be able to overcome the racism of this world. Because Israel has set the bar. Because they came out of Europe and brought all the people of that land into a coalition that you heard him talk about. And he received me in that coalition of people in that land. I had my children fly down from Israel to be here. And I want you to see those who were born in Israel. And I want them to join me on the stage and stand back and see those sons and daughters of former slaves, as Dr. King said. And Dr. King, when he spoke in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, and said to the world that he had been to the mountaintop.
That's right.
And looked over and seen the promised land. He said, I may not get that with you, but we as a people
That's what he said.
will get to the promised land. And a year and a half later, I took my wife and 2 little girls to Israel and started a new life. To this very day. I'm proud to say Israel gave me a new home. These are my children, born in Israel. Born in and they were educated in Israel. All the way to master's degrees and PhD in Israel. With diversity, as the Consul General said. And he asked me to work with him and continue to work for Israel. I took 5 of Israel's top citizens to Ghana, to the Ashanti Hini in Kumasi, so that they could see the African presence in Africa of Israel. And they were received at the highest level by the president. I went to the Ghanaian embassy of Israel and met the scholar of the wife of the Consul General. I took the head of the security of Israel so that they could see for themselves. I took the head of Agridev to talk about the drip irrigation. You don't know how great a relationship we have in Israel with all of the people, so that you'll know that the Consul General is here, as he said, to make you know he's your brother, he's your friend, and Israel is your friend. So they served in the military. They became not killers, but protectors of the land. They have pledged to lift up God's land and people. So I want you to know, I'm here not for me, but for the peace of Israel. And these sons and daughters of yours and ours I'm making you proud in that man.
Georgia Bell, photographer in the house. And the Crusader newspaper.
Ready? One. Wait, I can't see somebody's name back there. Okay. Y'all see me? Yes. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 2.5.
Brad.
4.
There's a wonderful likeness of you for you to commemorate tonight and for us to remember all that you have done to serve your community. Again, we salute you.
I just want to take a few moments to introduce you to some of the leaders from the Shiloh Institute, the organization that is about to be launched, with the mission of helping to cultivate ethical global leaders through the development of their spiritual, ethnic, and national identity. Spiritual identity as Judeo-Christians, their national identity as African Americans, and their ethnic identity as descendants of Africa. Our goal and our output are these young leaders who we're going to bring up, and also to help to change the conversation between the Black and Jewish community as we've done today. When I met Prince Asiel, what I understood is that as many of us as Christian young leaders and as Christians in America, we didn't even know this story. We didn't even know this story that was critical in our African American history. And every time that we talked about it, African American, especially young people, were fascinated to know and to see Israel in a different light by learning about this story, the story of Prince Asiel and the Hebrew community, and they would always ask old and young leaders, how is Israel treating, and how did Israel treat this community? So it's been a pleasure to have you all this evening. I want to just share just a few moments for you to see some of the young leaders who have experienced Israel and many other experiential learning opportunities, some of the new global leaders, ethical global leaders that we're raising up in this world. So if we'll just take just a few moments of your time, and then we will have the benediction. So.
Good evening, and thank you so much, distinguished guest, and thank you, Kristina King, for this wonderful opportunity to speak. My name is Festus Amoye, and I am a Nigerian American. And my parents migrated to the United States in the 1980s. Unfortunately, they passed away when I was in high school. And so I had a longing to return to the land of my parents in Nigeria. And so when my mother passed away, I had that opportunity. And there was a surreal feeling that came with landing in that place and leaving that plane and feeling automatically at home. I'll share a scripture with you in John 1:35 through 42. John calls to his disciples and he says, "Behold the Lamb of God." And immediately 2 of his disciples followed him. And it says they spent time together. That time was in fact impactful and had far-reaching implications. As soon as those disciples finished that time with Christ, Andrew went and got his brother Peter. And Peter was known as the Rock. Shiloh is becoming that rock. A place of strength, a place of fondness, a place of stability for Africans in the diaspora who wish to share their home experience of Israel. So with that being said, I want to thank Kristina King, who continues to call brothers and sisters who wish to share the dialogue the time of impact with one another in that land, and take that experience and share it with others, both locally and afar. And with that said, Prince Ben Asiel, we commend you today for stepping out to close that rift that so often people have ideologically. Sir, you have served as a bridge. You have served as the cornerstone and stepping stone of a bridge experientially, so that we can trace back our history and bring others to that land. So with that, we say thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to Kristina King. Thank you.
I'd like to ask our poet to share a few moments with you, Michaela Norwood.
If you have it, then give it. If you talk it, then live it. If hearing the fate of others don't raise the stakes enough for you, let's flip it. Switch the perspective so that it's no longer someone else's pain plastered on the 6 o'clock news. Imagine it's you, the new statistic everyone came to view. True. You forgot about that though, didn't you? Forgot there were once minds used to mold you, hands used to hold you, hearts used to fold you into themselves when you felt all by yourself in school, but you weren't. So don't get it confused, and don't act so far removed. I pity the fool who thinks that they pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps and stilettos, as if there weren't generations of ghettos that made the straps for them to get booted up in. As if there wasn't a cloud of witnesses in the form of Big Mama's knees bent in prayer closets doing the work of rooting out sin. As if when that PWI didn't let you in, there wasn't an HBCU arms open wide saying welcome back home again. As if there weren't neighborhood friends that resembled a lot more like family. Knowing Mama's rules and enforcing her boundaries about which streets you could and could not cross, about getting back home before the street lights came on, as if you got on your own, as if these Black-owned businesses weren't built for your benefit, as if your ancestors who were once called degenerate didn't build this period, as if your ground wasn't someone else's ceiling, as if your ceiling ain't gonna be someone else's floor, as if their floor won't obtain new doors with ceilings made of glass so someone else can crash through and do better. Dream brighter, reach higher, so they can fly into their new sense of self, as if you didn't need help. Beloved, every single gentle hand that ever caressed your scalp into cornrows, and every corner store that ever let you take milk home for free was sowing seed into the person that one day you were to be. And trust me, there were many generals that made it their mission to run a race that they knew they would not finish, but they did pass the baton, praying in good faith that one day you too would pass it on. So, I say again, if you talk it, then live it. And if you have it, then give it.
Isn't she lovely? Hello everyone, my name is Deborah Quaid. I am from Goshen, Mississippi, which is a small town on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And I just want to share a few words with you tonight about the investment that you would be making when investing into the Shiloh Institute. When you speak about the Shiloh Institute, we see the type of leadership that the Shiloh Institute is seeking after to create, to pour into. And I want to share a little bit about my own journey with Israel, Prince Ben Asiel. Thank you so much. I think as I've heard all the words tonight, I think about Abraham and how God said, look into the stars, and your descendants will be many, like more than that. And I feel very honored that when you began your journey all those years ago, that God had us in mind. So thank you so much. There's a prayer called the Shema, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the Shema. I'm no professional in the, or expert, I should say. I'm still learning, still a student of Israel, still a student of what God has invited me into. My first trip to Israel was in 2014. I was in seminary, and I went over, I was on a trip with all women, and so we got to experience the women of the Bible. And those experiences, I remember we were in a jewelry store, because that's what women do, we buy jewelry. And the rabbi who was speaking to us said, no one just comes to Israel, you have to be invited by God. And I remember just crying. And I didn't know I was crying at that time, but I knew the strong feelings that I was feeling was that I was experiencing someone who knew what I had known to be my religion, Christianity, speak about my God in a way that felt so kin. But and the only thing I had known prior to was that, there was the Jewish culture and religion, and then there was Christianity, but I didn't know a lot of details. But I knew what I knew in that moment as I shed those tears in that jewelry shop is that something about me and this rabbi was synonymous. There was something that was in sync, and there was something that unified us. And what comes to mind with the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4-5, I'll read, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one." So I'll just stop there first before I go into verse 5. And what I learned, what I remember from that time in that jewelry store is that the rabbi said, and I hope I'm quoting this right, but that our religions and our faith were very much like family members and cousins who have the same grandparents, or who have cousins of the same, grandparents. Oh, that's good, everybody gets that. And so with that, I just remember, I just bawled crying because for the first time, I was being introduced to something deeper in my faith and in my walk, in my journey. And that was that I had some family out there that I didn't know about. So that was in my spiritual, right? My spiritual identity, as we speak about with Shiloh. And so as I continued to become involved, so that was in 2014, ironically before Passages or Philos, any of these organizations existed. And when I came back, I had this burning desire to stay involved with Israel, to stay connected in the way that Jewish, there was a group of 41 Jewish kids. Yeah, they were on the birthright trip, and I remember they were so young, and I was the youngest person on my trip. And I was in seminary. I was like 20 years younger than the next person before me. So when I saw these young people, I was super excited. And then they were like, "Yeah, we go on this trip." Like they were all telling me all about all of this, and I just remember thinking, "Man, I wish we had that." And it didn't exist at that time, but the seeds were coming because 3 years later, that will launch. And that's how all of us have come to know each other at some point throughout this journey. And so I want you to know that as you continue to hear about Shiloh, as you think about Shiloh, that you are pouring into real human beings, real relationships, like you spoke about, Mr. Jackson, that there is something that is so great about the reconciliation and about the strengthening and the unity that we spoke about of the Jewish and the Black community. And I'm grateful to be a part of that. And as we've grown, I've gone to Israel 3 times. And every time, last time, Michael and I were actually together, and we got to go into some of the places where there were people who looked like me. And I remember the very first time, we were on a trip with about 20 people. I was the only Black woman. And the first time I saw another person who looked like me was in a subservient role. And we were at a Shabbat dinner. And I was my heart broke because I felt like, man, like this is what we need to know. We need to know more than what is served to us. From a very commercial way, but we need to know the truth. And I didn't know my truth when I started going to Israel. I didn't know my truth spiritually. I didn't know my truth ethnically. I didn't know my truth nationality. Now I've come more into knowing my identity that's through relationships that we've been able to build through organizations, from people like Kristina who are devoted to making sure that people like me who are at the bottom of the state of Mississippi know that, hey, you are connected to something greater and you are connected to something larger. And though, just like slavery, we got disconnected, there is power and there is, God has sent forth the people, the Moseses, the Prince Asiels, who are doing the work to open those gaps to bring us back together. And I believe that just as we just witnessed the great return, we're witnessing that with the Black and Jewish relationship. That is a call for action. There's a call for us to come together as one, because we have a God, and behold that God, we are one under him. And so I would like to also just conclude in saying that it is my pleasure and it's my honor to be in a room with people who have committed their lives to the work of things that are far greater than themselves. Thank you for being teachers to people like myself and my peers, that we have a great mantle to assume, that we don't take lightly the days that we walk on this journey. We don't take lightly the roles that you all play, and I know that as service people it gets hard, but I want to commend you. I pray that right now in this moment that you could feel that your work matters, and that you can see a representation of what it looks like to give and to watch your flowers bloom before you. So with that, I want to say thank you. You will have opportunities to be a part. We will ask you and offer those ways soon. But I just thank you so much for being a part today.
We are looking forward to sharing with all of you the vision of the Shiloh Institute, helping to develop these ethical global leaders who we will be sending out an army to help to change and heal and repair the world. And so we thank you. There's opportunities for you as you get ready to leave to give and to pick up some more information. And with that, we thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'd like to bring Rabbi Funye to the stage so that he might close us out in the benediction.
Thank you very much, Kristina. Consul General of Israel, Mr. Jackson, Congressman Davis, who spoke earlier, and to the professor, and to everyone that is here honoring a dear friend of mine, who we have been friends for many years. I don't know how you keep count about your children, but that's another story. Your words about interrelationship and working between the African American and the Jewish community, the Hebrew community, the Black Jewish community, we are one. Kol Yisrael ha'arevim zeh b'zeh. We are all responsible for each other. We have an obligation to each other. I just want to say, in closing this program, we love you, we honor you, and we thank God that you have received this honor and these accolades this evening. We ask God's blessings upon you and your family and this entire community. Yevareka Adonai v'yishmareka. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and be gracious unto you. Shalom. The Lord turn his countenance upon you, and may he bless all of us with peace. God bless, and good night.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys. I'm gonna go to my family.
Well, I just got in Israel yesterday, and I'm honored and happy to be here to see and meet all of the people, and so much proud of my grandfather, all the accomplishments and the journey, and all the things that he has built for us and for the people of Chicago and the land of Israel. And it's just been a great day to see all of this.
Yeah, he said it well. I'm Lori. I'm his auntie, Prince Asiel's daughter, and we are all celebrating and happy that he made major sacrifices. We enjoyed living in the country of Israel when we were there. We made a lot of connections, and we're happy to be here today to see his dream come to fruition.
Greetings. Blessed to be a part of this event. Very informative, the speeches that were given, as far as the connection, and giving honor to Prince Asiel Ben Israel for his work over the years, and it was absolutely invigorating and inspiring. So we look forward to being a part of Shiloh and also experiencing the Demona experience as well. I was talking to my wife about that. Anything that you recall about?
Truly amazing night. All the speakers were amazing. I loved the end when I got to see the children and the younger people who were getting ready to take this movement to the next level, and I look forward to being a part of that as much as we ever can be. So thank you so much for having us.
Blessed to be a part of it.
Get back this side now, okay, guys?
I got you.
Kidding now.
Stay right there, another one.
This was a quick tribute to Prince Asiel Ben Israel, dating 81 years of his existence and 50 straight years of his dedication to his people, to his God, and to the land of Israel, making sure that we continue to resurrect and revive and save our people at large. Thank you.
The Shiloh Institute, I thank each and every one of you for being here and celebrating Prince Asiel and all his accomplishments. We are thankful for all that you have done to be here with us. I'd like to thank you for all your support, and we look forward to working with each of you while we continue the work that must be necessary to improve our communities. Thank you.